Welcome. In this video, we will introduce you to requirements negotiation concepts, the 4 key tasks associated with it, and how to use specific techniques to achieve conflict resolution within the context of requirements. An introduction to requirements negotiation. In order to complete the requirements validation activities of the project successfully, the requirements engineer must have an awareness of potential requirements conflicts that exists. These requirements conflicts must be resolved in order to complete the requirements validation processes and being able to progress to the next stage of the project. Conflict management with requirements consists of 4 tasks. Task 1, conflict identification. Task 2, conflict analysis. Task 3, conflict resolution, and Task 4, documentation of the conflict resolution. Let's now look at what each of these 4 tasks entail. Task 1, conflict identification. It is very common that different stakeholders might be requesting requirements to be included that conflict with each other. This is simply a result of conflicting priorities between stakeholder groups, and they may not realize they are requesting conflicting requirements. This is why the requirements engineer should identify these types of conflicts as soon as it arises. Task 2, conflict analysis. The first step after identifying that a conflict in the requirements has arisen is to determine what is the nature of the conflict. There are a few common types of conflicts that occur, which is closely related to the reasons they occur. The first type of conflict is a data conflict. This is typically where all stakeholders are not agreeing to a requirement that is specified in a certain way. For example, the business stakeholder might want to retrieve 1,000 records at a time in real time, whereas the technology stakeholder knows this is practically impossible and not feasible. The second type of conflict is a conflict of interest. This type of conflict arises when 2 or more stakeholders have different priorities or goals within their own business area, which is determining the requirements they are asking for. An example of this could be that the customer services stakeholder is asking to be able to see all personal customer data when supporting a customer on the phone, where the company's data privacy stakeholder is saying that the personal information of their customers are sensitive and should not be available in its entirety to the customer services representatives. The third type of conflict is referred to as a conflict of value. This type of conflict arises when the stakeholders have different values or beliefs about what is acceptable or not acceptable. For example, one stakeholder might believe it is acceptable to ask a customer to enter their culture heritage as a mandatory field on the screen during an online application for a welfare payout, whereas the other stakeholder might believe this is an unacceptable request and should only be an optional field for the customer to provide if they choose to. The fourth type of conflict is referred to as relationship conflict. This is the type of personal relationship conflict where 2 stakeholders do not get along. This causes some emotional anxiety during requirements meetings, and often these types of stakeholders would try and force requirements onto the project purely based on winning the conflict with another stakeholder. The fifth type of conflict is a structural conflict, which is when a more senior team member or stakeholder continuously rejects the requirements contributions made by their less senior colleagues. In most cases, the conflicts that arise within the context of requirements engineering is a combination of these different types of conflicts. It is, however, important to understand the different types of conflicts to be able to effectively resolve the conflicts. Task 3, conflict resolution. Conflict resolution is very important for requirements negotiation because the strategy of conflict resolution has a big influence on the willingness of the people involved to continue to work together. If even just one party who is involved in a conflict resolution is not satisfied with the outcome of the resolution, the project could potentially lose stakeholder engagement, which in turn could affect the overall project in a negative way. When the conflict has been resolved in a way that truly satisfies all parties involved, it could have an additional positive effect on the overall project and its stakeholder relationships. So it is very important to handle the conflict resolution effectively. There are a few key considerations when you have to manage the resolution of a conflict. Ensure everyone that is involved in the conflict is being engaged to resolve the conflict. The next consideration is to choose the most appropriate conflict resolution technique. Technique 1. Agreement. Agreement is when the stakeholders work together to negotiate a solution to the conflict. This involves discussion of each other's views in order to try to persuade people experiencing the conflict to agree to a workable solution. Technique 2. Compromise. This technique is about using alternative parts of various solutions to try and come up with a solution that could be a compromise for all stakeholders, but an acceptable solution to go forward with. Technique 3. Voting. This technique is simply to ask all stakeholders involved with the requirements and/or the conflict itself to vote on a set of alternative options for a solution. The solution with the most votes is accepted as the resolution for the conflict. Technique 4. Definition of variance. This technique is a way that is selected to develop the solution where the different stakeholders can apply their own variance to the solution as parameters. This way, the different stakeholders get their preferred solution implemented. Technique 5. Overruling. This technique is aligned with the organizational hierarchy. The more senior stakeholders' requirements or proposed solution is the one that will be taken forward as the resolution. Technique 6. Consider all facts, CAF. This technique is about collecting all facts and influencing factors relating to the requirements that are in conflict. These facts and factors are then prioritized in readiness to be used as an input into the plus-minus interesting, or PMI technique. Technique 7. Plus-minus interesting, or PMI. With this technique, all the positive and negative repercussions of a solution alternative is being analyzed. 2 categories, one for plus and one for minus, are developed in order to list the positives and negatives. When a fact or factor is neither a positive nor a negative item, it is placed in the interesting column. Technique 8. Decision matrix. This technique to resolve a requirements conflict comprises of a comparison matrix of all key criteria that needs to be considered against each solution alternative. By compiling this comparison information in a matrix format, it often highlights which is the best solution to choose. This, therefore, resolves any conflicts with the collated information provided. Task 4. Documentation of the conflict resolution. The final task of resolving conflicts in requirements engineering involves the documentation of the resolution agreed. It is important to document the complete detail of a conflict resolution to prevent the same conflict to arise again during the life of the project. It is also useful to document these details in case the team later realizes that the solution that was agreed as a resolution before may not be appropriate anymore. The detailed documentation will enable the team to avoid going down the same resolution path again and be informed about what the reasons were for choosing the original resolution. In summary, requirements negotiation is about requirements conflicts between stakeholders. There are 5 different types of conflict situations. In most cases, a conflict situation is a combination of different types of conflicts. There are 4 tasks to perform when you manage requirements negotiation activities. These tasks are: Task 1. Conflict identification. Task 2. Conflict analysis. Task 3. Conflict resolution and Task 4. Documentation of the conflict resolution. During the task of conflict resolution, we also discussed 8 different techniques that you can apply when resolving conflicts. I look forward to sharing the next topic with you in the next video.